Manchester, and Israel, and Netanya, in fact. And delighted to launch our new program today, Coffee Chats and a bit more. And I've passed Percy Walk, so I'm not quite sure who I'm following anyway, whether it's the One Show or the Breakfast TV. But on our lineup today, we're going to have our very own Rabbi Black, who's giving us thought for the day, and Frank, who is our correspondent from Netanya. And that's going to be followed by our very own Karen Flaum, and I'm going to be in conversation with her. So without further ado, let's go back to Rabbi Black, who's going to give some insight.
Can you hear me? Oh.
Yes.
Oops.
Hi, Rabbi.
Hello. Well, have you introduced me yet? Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Yes, I did actually. I gave you the full works, Rabbi. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Your bandwidth is very low, and I didn't actually hear you. So, so I'm sorry about that. Let me. There we are. Okay, right. I'm on board now. Okay, so let me just give. First, I think this is a great idea to have all these people involved, and it's very, very nice to see Frank all the way from Israel. Hi, Frank. Hi. Good morning. Or good afternoon there. And I'm just going to give you a little Devar Torah today, a simple little Devar Torah. And it's from this week's Sedra, and let me just share this with you. Which is talking about the Aron. You shall overlay it with pure gold, inside and outside shall it be overlaid. The verse from this week's Sedra is speaking about the Aron, the Holy Ark, which was placed in the Holy of Holies and contained within it the two tablets. The Torah is saying that it should be constructed of atzei acacia wood, but superimposed with pure gold. The details of this I'll not go into here. However, I will say that there were actually three separate boxes within each other. The outer was made of gold, the middle of acacia wood, and the inner box was made of pure gold. Listen to the statement from Rabbah in the Gemara in Yoma 74b. He says, basing himself on these words that the Aron should be overlaid inside and out with pure gold, we learn, he says, that a Talmid Chacham, a learned person, has to be Tocho Kebaro, which means his inner life has to be a reflection of his outer life. Listen to those words, very important. The pure gold represents Torah, and just as the Aron had to be covered inside and out with gold, so too what is going on in the inner recesses of our hearts has to be a reflection of how we are on the outside. So therefore we have to be inside and outside, overlaid inside and outside. That's what the Talmud is saying. We have to be pure gold. We have to be honest. We have to be good on the outside and also on the inside. It's quite a statement. He says that within the seemingly mundane instructions to build the Aron HaKodesh, a message to the Jew that within him he has to be Tocho Kavaro. His inner life should be like his outer life. Don't be a fake. Don't be a hypocrite. That is what the Torah seems to be saying, or Rabbah seems to be saying, from extrapolating that from the Torah. The Talmud in Brachot describes in detail how in the 1st century, a very famous and great rabbi called Rabbi Gamliel, who was the Nasi of the Jewish people, he was the leader, he was the chief rabbi, he was deposed from the post. You cannot stay chief rabbi forever, and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, a young man of only 18 years old, was elected in his stead. The Talmud says that one of the reasons why he was deposed from his post was because any Talmud, any student who came to study Torah in Rabbi Gamliel's yeshiva would be turned away unless He was tocho kebaro, same words. His inner life was like his outer life. He even placed a shomer hapetach, a gatekeeper, a bouncer on the entrance, who would turn away anybody who he thought was not tocho kebaro. By the way, I have no idea how he would do this, because who knows what is going on in ourselves? How can you tell whether somebody is really true to themselves and somebody really sincere? You can't always tell. But that's what he did. However, when Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah took over the leadership in Israel, the first thing he did was to remove the Shomer HaPetach, this bouncer on the door, and anybody who came to learn Torah would be allowed in. In other words, Rabbi Gamliel was really particular on a yeshiva bachar being a tocho bachar baro. He was exclusive. He wanted somebody to be a whole person, whereas to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, it was no big issue. He was more of an inclusivist. Just a desire to come and learn Torah was good enough for Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So what's the big deal? Tocha kabara, you can't be a hypocrite, you can't be a fake. Your inside and outside should be the same. That's the message of Rabbah on the surface of things. But look again carefully. The statement of Rabbah in the Talmud is not saying that your outside should reflect what is going on the inside. Instead, it says that tocho kavaro, your inside should be a reflection of the outside, the complete opposite of what you might think is it. What's the difference? Simple. Tocho kavaro means you might on the inside not have any inclination to be a kind, generous, loving person. However, you need to show on the outside how you are a person who is caring, generous, and kind. And that eventually will reflect on your inside and change who you are. You project the image of kindness to change the inner self. Have you got that? In other words, what you are on the outside reflects what you are on the inside. The other way around, making your outside a reflection of the inside could be tragic. If on the inside you are not loving and caring, you might be inside a corrupt and immoral person. You are never going to change and become a caring individual, because the outside becomes a reflection of your inner mind. This idea is actually translated into halakhic practice. Let me cite to you a few examples. There is such a thing called marit ha'ayin, the appearance of the eye. The halakha says that, as you are all aware, we're not allowed to drink milk at the same meal with meat. However, what about coconut milk, which looks like milk? Very similar to the real thing, or a more modern substitute, like, for example, parava crema. Am I allowed to drink this together with my meat? I mean, on the one side, if you think about it, when people see me doing that, and I'm eating together with people in my community or thing, they will say, hold on, the rabbi is drinking milk together with me, but I'm not. It's coconut milk. It's not actual milk. The answer is that I should not drink the milk, because people might think that I am drinking cow's milk. They might not know that I am drinking a milk substitute. What do I do to get around it? I leave some coconut shells next to the coconut milk, as the halacha says, or I leave a little sign saying this is power of the milk. People, therefore, will know the truth. I want to protect marit ha'ayin. So you might ask, what difference does it make what Mr. Goldberg from down the road thinks? I know the emet. I know that the milk is powerful. The answer is that the inner is a reflection of what is going on the outside. And whatever is on the outside has to be 100% image. The Torah commands, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Ask Rav Sham Rafael Hirsch. If you look at the Hebrew, it's all wrong. It would have been more proper to have written v'ahavta et re'echa kamocha. The et points to the subject, your neighbor. What does it mean, le re'echa, and you shall love to your neighbor? Literally, his response is to suggest the le re'echa means that you have to make every effort to your neighbor, le re'echa, even if your natural inclination were different. But you still have to, on the outside, try to make the difference. Act the part, create the outer appearance of love, and that will lead you to change internally. Tocho kavaro. His inside becomes like his outside. His inner appearance changes and reflects that which he is on the outside. So, my friends, the message of the Aron HaKodesh, V'tzipita oto zahav tahor mibayis u'mechutz tzapena, overlay it with gold inside and out. Make sure that our insides reflects the image that we project on the outside. Got it? Keep well and have a good morning. Keep well.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Rabbi Black, for your thoughts on something that we need to reflect upon today. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, at vast expense, we are very fortunate to have Frank Weinberg on the call this morning or this afternoon, as it is in Israel, and he's going to give us some insights into what's actually happening in Israel and life there at the moment. Thanks very much, Frank.
Thank you for that, and Chodesh Tov to everybody.
Yes.
Thanks to Roy, who billed me as the Netanya correspondent.
Yes, that's right.
I'm not quite sure how you appreciate that it was at great expense because, as they say, the invoice is in the post.
Yeah.
But thanks anyway.
Yeah.
I really was given a blank sheet of paper and wasn't quite sure what to make of this. And I actually thought I would look at this from a personal perspective. Yeah, at the beginning of September, and although we spent a few weeks back in England recently, we're back home now. When you're talking about correspondence, I guess the first thing we do is we think of TV news. And whenever we watch the news, the TV at home, as soon as they say we're now going over to our Israel correspondent, our hackles, rise, the tension is there as we're waiting to see what garbage, what anti-Israel propaganda Sky is going to produce, or whatever rubbish is going to come out of the BBC, otherwise known as the Beirut Broadcasting Company. Hopefully this morning will be slightly different. Hopefully what I tell you about Israel, yes, it might show up some of the warts that are here as well, but it should be a bit lighter and taken in the context that it's meant. At the start, let me say that there are just 3 mitzvot that we can perform, or that are performed, with the whole body. The first one is sukkah. You have to put your whole body in the sukkah to fulfill the mitzvah of sukkah. One is mikvah, and the third one is Alyah. And it was really during last summer that Annette and I decided to take upon ourselves to bring that third mitzvah, the mitzvah of Alyah, to life for us as a family. So what I'm going to do today is to talk about our life as Olim Chadashim, as new immigrants, having been Israeli citizens since the beginning of September. What's the first thing, the most important thing that really hit us? I guess it's probably the same as anywhere in the world. It's Israeli bureaucracy. And how can we really talk about Israeli bureaucracy? What is it? Well, let me give you an idea. The first thing when you come there, you're given by the various ministries list of things you have to do, people you have to contact, and a lot of it is you try and do by telephone. And what is great is you phone the ministry of this, the ministry of that, and when you get through, invariably it says press 1 for Hebrew, press 2 for French, press 3 for Russian, press 4 for English. We press 4, and for 45 minutes we listen to music. And that music is punctuated by the message or the equivalent of the message that says, please hold, your call is important, or we know you're waiting, we'll be with you as soon as we can. And after 45 minutes, the person at the other end picks up the phone. And in my very best Hebrew, I say, Slicha, ata medaber Anglit? Do you speak English? To which the reply very promptly is no. Slam the phone down, and that's the end of the conversation with that department, having held on for 45 minutes. And then you go back through the same thing again. And if you're lucky on the second or third attempt, you'll get to someone who will speak English. And that's why you've pressed 4 in the first place. The other thing that is very noticeable in Israel is that wherever you go, whatever you do, you go into a building, the first thing you do is you take a ticket. and that ticket has a number. And then you sit and you wait for your number to be called. And it doesn't matter now, you can go to a government office, you can go to the bank, you go to the post office, you go to your health center, wherever you go, first thing is take a number, and then you sit and wait. So if you park that idea for a moment, we, through the Alyah department, were given a link to a particular website that once you've made Alyah, you go onto this website and you make all the appointments directly through this website for all the government offices you need to visit. Now, one of the things that everyone has to have in Israel and you have to carry around with you all the time in Israel is your identity card, your Teudat Zehut. And to get this Teudat Zehut, we had to go through the website, and you have to make an appointment to go to the ministry, present various documents, and then they'll order this for you. Well, we applied to go, and I think when we logged on in Netanya, to go to the local office in Netanya, we could have got an appointment for 3 months after we arrived. I know a number of people from Kenton who've made Alyah. Joy Melkay, who came just before us, ended up going to Hadera for their meeting to get their Teudat Zehut. And Annette and I trotted off to Herzliya for ours. Now, bearing in mind Israeli efficiency and the way it works, we were somewhat taken aback when we were told that our appointment was at 8:48 in the morning. I mean, a very precise time. And off we trotted to Herzliya. First thing you do when you go in is you take your ticket, your number, and you sit. And the fact that it was way past 8:48 was neither here nor there, but we sat and waited until our number was called. And we went to the desk and we said, we're here to get our Teudat Zehut. And they said, well, you want to renew your existing one? Where is it? We said, no, we've come for a new one. Oh no, to do that, you need an appointment for an hour each. So even though we've gone through the website, we've gone through the link that we've been given by the Alyah department, they contrived to send us the wrong appointment. So what they actually told us was, come back tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Tomorrow morning, the building is not open to the general public. It's closed and it's just an administrative day. Come along, the doors will be closed, but at 8 o'clock when you get here, knock on the door, someone will let you in and we'll see you then. Being English and somewhat, precise with the time, we got to the office back in Herzliya at 7:45 the following morning. As they said, it was all locked up. We knocked on the door for security to let us in. Nothing. We knocked on the door at 7:55 for security to let nothing. At 8 o'clock on the dot, the security opened the door and let us in. We walked in and we sat down. We're the only people there. It's not open to the public. And a woman comes across and says, you haven't taken your ticket yet. So we're the only people there. We still had to go Dafka to take the ticket to be allowed in for this meeting. And eventually, after an hour, we managed to get exactly what we were after. But the bureaucracy of you have to have your ticket, even if the office is closed, c'est la vie, welcome to Israel. Healthcare here is a big thing, and you join when you arrive. The healthcare, I think, falls somewhere between sort of the NHS type system. There's obviously no NHS here, but the healthcare system falls somewhere between the NHS type system and a private system. You have to be a member of a healthcare. Depending on how much you pay will depend on the services and what you can get and what you're covered for and what you're not covered for. But it seems to work fairly efficiently insofar as you can go, you register with the GP, and then you will be invited to have test after test after test, where they take your health very seriously and will look after you and make sure, hopefully, please God, that everything is okay and that you're fighting fit. In the event that, God forbid, there's a problem, they will sort it out, they will look after you. And again, the healthcare seems to be very, very good. We were recommended to join the Maccabi healthcare, if for no other reason that in the area of Netanya, a lot of Maccabi has a reputation of having a number of doctors and the hospitals as being English speaking. And therefore, if you have an issue, it's much easier to understand and to be made understood if you're in an English environment. So Annette and I both joined Maccabi. And having come here in September, the system worked particularly well because through Maccabi, we then managed to go within days. In fact, we went at the beginning of October, managed to get our third COVID, our boosters here. We'd had the first 2 vaccinations in England, arrived in Israel, and through our Maccabi healthcare, we went and had our third vaccinations. Yesterday, I went off to the Maccabi office to try and make an appointment for us to have our 4th jabs because it wasn't letting me do it online. And I went along to the Maccabi office and they told me, no problem for me to make an appointment. It has to be 4 weeks after, 4 months, excuse me, after your last jab. So I was eligible on the 7th of February, as was Annette. When they looked, they managed to lose all of Annette's vaccination history out of the health system in Israel, from the Ministry of Health, from Maccabi and its records. Annette had disappeared from the system completely, so they wouldn't let Annette go for her vaccination. She kindly WhatsApped me the certificate that the Ministry of Health had issued in October to her, confirming that she'd had 3 vaccinations, confirming the dates. And lo and behold, we had a phone call at about 10 o'clock this morning to say her records had now been reinstated. And we are both off jab number 4 next Tuesday afternoon. So that's something for us to look forward to. Over the years, I think it's probably fair to say that Israelis have a little bit of a reputation, maybe, of being, should we say, a little bit aggressive at times. And one of the things this was really highlighted yesterday for me in particular. Israel has a travel system, and whereas in England we have our Oyster card system, in Israel we have Rav Kav, where you can pay and you subscribe for your travel, and as you just swipe it and you get charged for whatever you want to. You load money on it in the first place. And if you are over a certain age, you are able to get discounts. So if you put 100 shekels on, if you're over a certain age, you might get 150 or 180 credits, whereas before that you would only get 100 credits, however it works.
Yeah.
When I subscribed, thank you, Roy, when I subscribed for my Rav Kav, I was not deemed to be over the age to get the benefits, albeit that Annette, who is younger than me, was, because there are different ages for ladies to men. But in the interim, my birthday was a few weeks ago, I now qualified as the OAP as well. So I thought, great, I'll go to Rav Kav, the central bus station here in Netanya. Very simple, just get them to amend this, put in my date of birth, recognize that, and to effectively buy more credits as an Israeli OAP. If you go to the central bus station here in Netanya, it's very good. There are 3 windows Rav Kav have. We went to there was very long queues at 2 of the windows and no queue at the 3rd one. So I decided I'd be English and go to the 3rd one, which was absolutely fine because there was a girl sitting there busily texting away on the telephone and totally oblivious to anyone else and everything else. When I actually asked if I might be so bold as to interrupt her and to perhaps whether she could help me, the response was, can you come back tomorrow? You have to just join the queue to the 2nd window, and eventually got to the front. And again, in my best Hebrew, explained, because, you know, why should I have anyone speaking English in a central bus station where there's loads of tourists passing through? Managed to explain what I was trying to do and the purpose of my trip. And she took my Rav Kav, she took my Taudat Zahut, and spent about 10 minutes trying to do it without any success. Whilst I was queuing and while she was dealing with me, and there's a long queue behind, out of nowhere, a fairly elderly gentleman just turned up and barged in and started shouting at the lady behind the glass thing that she needed to help him. And again, in my very best Hebrew, I explained to him that there was a line, there was a queue, and if he joined the end, he'd be seen very soon. To which his response in Hebrew was, "I'm now 83. And he didn't take kindly when I turned around and just wished him a happy birthday. But in the end, they sent him packing and sent him on his way. The girl, as I say, was unable to help me. She couldn't sort out the problem. So she said, go to the next window. I said, I'm not going to queue again. And she said, no, just go to the front of the queue. And as soon as she's finished dealing with whoever she's dealing with, you're next in the queue there, which is what I did. And a couple of people in the queue behind me sort of started making noises. And I explained again in my pidgin Hebrew that just hang on, this is what they told me to do. Until a beshaitled Russian lady came up and physically grabbed hold of me and pushed me, shoved me, and pulled me out of the queue, kicking and telling me that I'm not going in front of her. And it was very interesting. We were waiting for the police to arrive. I was very, very, obviously, you can't push back, you can't do anything. And the woman behind the grass in the cubicle said, don't worry, you're next. And it was this Russian lady and the woman had an absolute screaming fit. And everyone is just, the place comes to a standstill and, welcome to Israel. This is what it is. Eventually, allegedly, this has now been resolved. Whether it has or not, I'll find out when I log on later on and check the credits on my rough cover card. One of the things in the time we've been here is to notice, certainly around, not only in Netanya, but throughout Israel, the Kenton community presence here. Over the years, Kenton has been such a Zionistic community in its ideals and what it's done. And I don't think over the years, it's ever been in your face. It's never been at you the whole time. But the number of people, a number of families from Kenton who are now in Israel is just astonishing. And I have to say, there are people who we know well from Kenton days who we perhaps never socialized with, weren't necessarily close friends. There are close friends as well. But that Kenton bond here in Israel is so obvious and so much appreciated. And I really, there is, the same as we've got the Shawl, the Keeping in Touch WhatsApp group, there's actually a WhatsApp group called Kenton in Israel that has 24 different families who are members of that WhatsApp group. And there's always messages coming out on that. And it's just lovely to be that sense of belonging. But there were actually two sad events in recent months that have occurred, but have made me feel so proud to belong and be part of such a special community. You probably know from the emails, I think, that came out that I've lost track of days, last week, sadly, Maureen Gordon passed away. I'm sure people will remember Maureen and Alfie. Alfie was a warden. Maureen was involved supporting Alfie in everything he did in Kenton. And I've been in touch with the family. We were socially friendly with them. And on a couple of days ago, I'd been to the Levaya in Netanya, but we went to Bet Shemesh to the Shiva. And strewn across the table in Julie's house, she's sitting Shiva on her own, were photos and photos, mainly of her parents from their days in Kenton, and a book with photos of them in Kenton. And as people were coming in, they were talking about, this is my family from their Kenton days. And it really was just so prominent there and made me so proud to be part of this community that had left such an indelible mark in the hearts of the Gordon family. And that to me was really great. The other one was a couple of months ago when, I don't know if you remember, but those of you who will know Rabbi Daniel Rosella, who is now, I think, the Rav at Alyah Sion, but who grew up in Kenton before going off to Belmont. And you may recall again that his mother, Pearl, passed away. We went off to Yerushalayim to visit Daniel while he was sitting Shiva. We got to the Shiva house and we walked in, and sitting, this was maybe 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock in the morning, and sitting there were 3 other Kenton families. We were the 4th ones to come in. There was no one else there, just Kenton families. And as we sat chatting with Daniel, he was taking so much comfort from the number of families from people of his age who had been in touch, who had been to the Levaya, who had been to the Shiva. And he was just talking about the support of the Kenton community in Israel for him and his family over the years. And when we walked out of that Shiva house, again, it was just such a proud moment that I'd like to have been able to lift and bring back into Kenton. And I think it's something that the community as a whole should take so much pleasure and so much comfort from, that it has this amazing influence in Israel and on the hearts of so many other people. As an aside, Daniel was sitting Shiva in Katamon. It's a beautiful day, and Annette and I actually walked from Katamon right down to the Kotel. Probably took us an hour and a half, and we stopped to eat on the way. We had our time at the Kotel, and then as we decided to leave the Kotel, we thought we'd grab a taxi and go up to Machane Yehuda. We'd come to Jerusalem on the train. We were going up to Machane Yehuda. So I think by the Kotel, it's the Dung Gate. And we came out there, and there's like taxis in a queue. You get in the first taxi that's in the queue. And there was just something uncomfortable about being in this taxi. The meter was buried effectively like in the ashtray, where the ashtray would be in the car. And there was a schmutter over the top. You couldn't see the meter. And when you drive away from the Kotel there, is invariably a lot of traffic. And I just said to the driver, once he started moving, which way are we going to go up to Machane Yehuda? I just had a feeling he was going to take us on a guided tour of Jerusalem and keep the clock running. To which he turned around and says, if you don't trust me, if you don't like what it is, why don't you get out the taxi? By which time we were at the Jaffa Gate. So we said, fine, we'll get out the taxi, thank you very much. And we were absolutely right, because clearly his meter had been running for ages before we'd even got in the cab. So to go from the Dung Gate to the Jaffa Gate, he wanted something like 60 shekels, which probably would have been a 20 shekel fare. What upset me was that I was being ripped off by another Jew from in Ir HaKodesh. But I decided, I just don't want to make a fuss. All we want to do is get out the cab, and we'll, from Jaffa Gate, we take the tram up to Machane Yehuda, and then we get the train home. The guy told us to get out on the passenger side, not to get out onto the oncoming traffic. We got out the car, the taxi drove off back into the old city. And as he'd gone, I put my hands in my pockets, looked around. My telephone, I'd lost in the back of his cab. I think as I was moving across the back seat of the cab, it must have fallen out my pocket. So we were thinking, what are we going to do? What should we do? And I said, look, if we're going to have an insurance claim, maybe we need to report it to the police, because if we go to the police, there'll be some kind of, not a crime number, but an incident number that the insurers might want. And if you know it, just by the Jaffa Gate, there's a police station there. We went to go in, and because of COVID, it was all locked up, and the guy opened the window and explained what had happened. He took us in, and he said, hang on here for a minute. He disappeared. 2 guys came out to see us, neither of whom I'd have liked to have met in a dark alley, just wearing T-shirts, jeans, and looking rough types. Both spoke fluent English. And he said, we understand that a taxi has gone off with your phone. So I said, yes. And I just wanted to report. He said, don't worry, we'll get your phone back for you. I said, pardon? He said, I need to take your photo. He said, where you told us where you were dropped off, how long ago it was. He said, we'll check the CCTV. We'll find the taxi that dropped you off. We will trace that taxi. We will get your phone. This is what they were prepared to do for a schmerel who'd got out the car carelessly and left his phone on the back seat. And this is the lengths they were prepared to go to for me. At which time Annette said, can we try and phone Frank's phone? And maybe if the guy will pick up, we can ask him to come back. To which one of the policemen said, give me the number. He wouldn't let us phone. He was going to phone. And in English, the conversation was in Hebrew, but went along the lines of the guy rang through, the taxi driver picked up the phone and said, who's this? And the policeman said, this is the police. Whose phone is that? What's it got to do with you? He said, no, you don't understand. We're the police. I'm telling you, whose phone is that? I don't know, you could be anybody. So the policeman said, look, we know what's happened. We know who you are. We know where you are. He said, you can have a choice of two things. You can bring that telephone back to the police station now. He said, or we will visit you tomorrow morning. We will collect the phone and we will collect your taxi driving license at the same time. You have the choice. And he hung up, and the policeman took Annette and myself into a room at the back of the police station, offered us a cup of tea or coffee, and he said, your telephone will be here within the next 10 minutes. And as true as his word, in 10 minutes' time, we got our telephone. I got my telephone back. The length that the police in Jerusalem went to get that phone back was, I mean, I can't, to this day, I'm still just so appreciative of what they did for us. They really, really were very, very kind. And I think, you know, there's two sides to all stories, and we've said about the Balagan and the Israeli aggression. The police there were absolutely fantastic. Some time ago, on one of my Shabbaton trips to Israel, on a Shabbat, the late Rabbi Sachs gave a shiur or a lecture, which was broadly titled, Is Israel a Jewish state or a state for Jewish people? And it's something that's lived with me for a long time. And I could never make sure in my own mind what it was. Is it a Jewish state where the laws of Judaism are mandatory? Or is it a Jewish state where it's a refuge for everybody if you're Jewish and you can come here? And for me, I think as an observant Jew, it's probably both. And, you know, I get in the car here, I drive to shul in the morning and I listen to the radio. And I'm assuming that on some of the radio stations I listen to that the presenters are not necessarily religious, but it's still great when I'm driving and I hear on the radio when they turn around and say, you know, it's Friday, Shabbat Shalom or Chag Sameach. I was listening yesterday morning where they were reporting on the news that somebody had passed away. And just to hear the news broadcast in Hebrew, and when they talk about someone who passed away, Yehi Zichro Baruch. The non-religious, these phrases, there are these constant reminders that we're in a very special place and a very special state. Just to walk around the streets and to see Hebrew everywhere, I find just awesome. But initially for me, spending a lot of time in Israel and seeing Hebrew was problematical. I think that in England, when we see Hebrew, when we look at Hebrew, we think of Hebrew as Lashon Kodesh. It's a religious, it's a holy language. And if we have things in Hebrew, and I know I've done this in the past, and there are probably other people, you have something in Hebrew, and you'll take it and ask the rabbi, is this Shomus, or can I put this in the Shomus box? We don't do anything with the Hebrew. So for me, when I hear the words Baruch Haba, it comes from Tehillim. Baruch Haba is what I said in Hallel in shul this morning. So when I go to somebody's home and I clean my shoes on their doormat and imprinted on the doormat says Baruch Haba, welcome, I used to have a major problem. To me, how can I be cleaning my shoes on holy words? But this is a problem that we come to get used to, and something that perhaps now we take a little more for granted. But there are other signs that are with us. You know, in Judaism, we have lots of signs. There are signs that remind us all the time that we are Jewish. We wear our kippah. We have the tzitzit. We wear tefillin. All these things are reminders as we go through our day and as we go through our life that we're Jewish and that there's something special. But for me, you know, just to be around and to be walking the streets of Netanya, to breathe the air of Netanya makes you aware that you're Jewish. To breathe the air is holy. To walk around the streets here on a Shabbat, even though there are cars driving past, even though there are people who are Chiloni, who are not religious, the air that you breathe here is so special. And for me, you know, just to walk along the street here, you see this eclectic mix. You see men with long beards and with peyot. You see people, men with tattoos, covered in these tattoos, walking around in a vest. You see women wearing shaitels, modestly dressed. You walk along the streets of Netanya and you see girls who are barely wearing their shorts and their vest. And all of this just adds up to make Israel the Jewish state and the state for Jews that it truly is. I can't tell you how much we feel at home and how proud we are to be part of Medinat Israel. So thank you for listening to my messages from Israel this morning. I hope I've given you a little bit of a feel what it's like for us from the heart. There's nowhere in the world I'd rather be right now. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Frank. We really appreciate it this morning. Your reflections on how you're faring, but also the insights into Israeli bureaucracy and also other aspects of life as well, and also the close bond that Kenson's former members have and their influences as well. Thank you so much.
As if I may speak, I'm
certainly go ahead.
Frank's parents. We're very proud. We miss him when he's not here with us in London, but we're very proud of both he and Annette for making Alyah, and we hope that they will spend many, many happy, peaceful and healthy years in Israel. And thank you, Frank, for everything you said. It was wonderful.
Checks in the post.
Thank you very much indeed. Very kind of you. It's very good to see you again. Now it's a great pleasure to welcome Karen this morning. Well, thank you very much, Frank. We very much enjoyed hearing you this morning.
Something of Karen.
Yes, of course.
Go on, Roy, go ahead.
I just looked on YouTube for Magic Mixture.
Oh, yes.
They've had 1,635 views.
Bloody hell.
So the question is,
the contract.
Sorry, I shouldn't have said that.
How many of those were you? How many of those 1,600?
Yes.
That's only since this morning, Karen.
Yeah, my fingers are really aching. That click, click, click.
Yeah, I think you need to be an agent for them now.
Yes.
I'd just like to thank everybody that's taken part this morning.
Yes,
I'm
right.
scared that you've set the standard high. We've had two very interesting talks, and I've got to follow this next week. So, Rochelle, you better find some good questions.
Yes, don't
And
worry.
I better find some good, interesting answers.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you so much, Frank and Karen.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Karen, you're great. You bring the whole thing alive, Karen. Well done.
Yes,
Well, I feel a wreck. I'm going
no, not. Go and have a drink
Thanks,
now.
everyone. Stay safe, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Take care.
Karen,
All the best now.
Karen,
Thank you, Jet Morris.
Karen, you said you worked in Dorset Square.
Yes.
I worked in Dorset Square.